Give me a reset on your audio.
Resetting audio.
Audio is good, and take it.
Hi, welcome to West 57. I'm Meredith Vieira. 1 year ago this week, a story made headlines in New York, and it's barely been off the front pages since. A 15-year-old black teenager named Tawana Brawley claimed she'd been kidnapped and raped by 6 white men, and her body covered with racial slurs. It was the only information she ever provided, and it unleashed a racial firestorm of charges and countercharges. At the center were Tawana's 3 advisors, Reverend Al Sharpton and lawyers C. Vernon Mason and Alton Maddox. They came to this case with one unshakable conviction, that for blacks in America, there is no justice. They hope to make Tawana a symbol of what blacks are not going to take anymore. But in the process, they've been accused of doing more harm to their cause than any racial bigot ever could. This is the story of the men behind Tawana Brawley, Maddox, Mason, and Sharpton.
But there was a response of hundreds of thousands of people in the black community who demanded that something be done. We learned that we have to constantly agitate, 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 and not make that a negative word.
Although agitate has become a negative word when applied by some to you and to Mr. Maddox, that's all that you two do really is agitate.
Yes.
That there is a justice system in this country, but you don't allow it an opportunity to work.
The presumption basically is this, Meredith. If we were not here or if we did not do this, the system would work. But when the system is really tested, the system says we're going to look the other way. We're going to cover up. We're going to exonerate. We're not going to really have equal justice for all people in this state.
If there was ever a case that seemed tailor-made to test the system, it's the case of Tawana Brawley. The 15-year-old from upstate New York got off a bus one night last November and vanished. 4 days later, she was found outside an apartment complex where her family used to live, taken to the hospital, and it was there that her Aunt Juanita found her.
When I got to the emergency room, I saw that all her hair had been pulled out or cut out. And what was left was matted with feces. But on her body was scrawled the words on her breast, KKK, and on her body, nigger twice.
When they rape and sodomize her and they do what they did to her and put KKK on her breast, they're sending a message to us, my brothers and sisters. And we're here tonight to say that we got the message and we got the answer.
The story Tawana Brawley told, that she was kidnapped for 4 days and raped by 6 white men, one of them a cop, cut deep into the psyche of blacks everywhere.
Minister Louis Farrakhan, this must cease. Absolutely. Then and only then can America be a nation where there will be peace.
Let Miss Brawley represent an example of what we're not going to stand for as parents, as Americans, and as human beings.
While the symbol of all this outrage lay silent on a couch, clutching a teddy bear, her advisors, Mason, Maddox, and Sharpton, began building a political movement around her. Brawley's story particularly struck Alton Maddox, who had himself been beaten by police as a young man, and whose bitterness finally boiled over.
Tawana Brawley is the litmus test. We are going to form a black army to deal with this because we have a human right to do that. Forget about the white man's civil rights. Forget about his constitutional rights. We are operating on human rights.
Maddox refused to sit for an interview, saying he had no desire to reveal himself to whites. But both Sharpton and Mason say it was he who dictated legal strategy in Tawana Brawley's case, carrying their Howard Beach tactics to an extreme. They got the governor to appoint a special prosecutor and then decided that neither man could be trusted. And as a predominantly white grand jury was being impaneled, they advised the Brawley family not to cooperate with its investigation.
The only way to do this was to put the system on trial, not to allow another whitewash. We had seen too many of them.
Judge, my client already knew the outcome of this. He has no confidence in the judicial system here. Black people in this state have no confidence. It should be a no surprise to the judiciary.
The black people cannot receive justice.
Yes.
So we will stand here and hold this court in contempt.
But as the weeks wore on, it was the advisors who risked contempt in the eyes of the public. They charged a cover-up and were quick to name suspects, but never provided a shred of evidence. Those who questioned them they called racists or Uncle Toms. When CBS aired a series of local reports contradicting their story, they sued. And all the while, the one person who knew the truth, Tawana, was counseled to remain silent.
They were using this young girl for their own purposes, their own self-aggrandizement.
New York Attorney General Robert Abrams was the special prosecutor in the Tawana Brawley case.
They had an agenda to try to be as dramatic and confrontational as is possible so that they'll have blazing headlines, put themselves in the vanguard of some kind of movement, make themselves heroes.
How would you describe their tactics throughout this case?
Reprehensible, irresponsible, abominable, despicable. We've got a lot of racial stress in New York and throughout this country, and they went ahead and further inflamed those tensions. And I think it was horrendous that they went ahead for their own political aims to go ahead and further polarize people in this society.
I think I have as much to do with inciting racial tension as a weatherman has to do with a thunderstorm. To announce a thunderstorm is coming does not mean that he's up there banging the clouds together. And for me to say racism exists is not for me to cause racial tension. I'm just pointing out what's there. I mean, all of this controversy, I don't see it in the streets. Most people I talk to understand exactly what we're doing. I turn on the television and it's like it's coming from another planet.
In the absence of facts, personalities took over, especially Reverend Al's. Exposed as a hustler and part-time FBI informant, Sharpton kept smiling. Before long, a tragic situation turned into a parody.
So you and Vernon will be the ones out front while Alton sort of pulls the strings in the background.
Well, let's put it this way. Vernon and I have never been accused of being camera shy.
You certainly have never been accused of that.
Oh, well, no, not since my baby pictures.
When you place Sharpton, who is incredible, in the center of an issue as volatile as this, you diminish the credibility of the case.
Brooklyn Assemblyman Roger Green was a longtime supporter of Mason and Maddox until their involvement with Sharpton and the Brawley case. He believes it brought out the worst in them and eventually in some of those who covered them.
Some in the media, I think, perhaps even received some kind of vicarious pleasure out of seeing the way that this case was handled because it perhaps reinforced their worst stereotypical canards of what black leadership is supposed to be like. The more that Sharpton engaged in extreme statements and in divisive tactics, the more they became isolated and insulated. There was a kind of tragic spiral that they were caught in. Sharpton served as a light bulb, and Vernon and Alton resembled gnats flying around a light that would eventually destroy them.
Before it was over, even some former aides had turned against them, calling them liars. They finally paraded Tawana before the cameras for a brief statement, but only after word had leaked that the grand jury wasn't buying their version of events.
My name is Tawana Brawley. I'm not a liar and I'm not crazy.
I simply just want justice, and then I want to be left alone.
If it turns out, A, that it's a hoax, or B, that justice is never served, is it going to help your credibility? I mean, this case now is...
If it is a hoax and we knowingly perpetrated a hoax, certainly it would hurt our credibility. But we are not perpetrating a hoax, knowingly or unknowingly. So I'm not concerned about that. Because ultimately, Martin Luther King was right. The ultimate way you're going to advance this movement is those on the other side show how ludicrous and how stupid they are. Just give them enough rope and they will hang themselves.
But they're saying the same thing about you, Reverend.
Well, how have we hung ourselves? I'm still here. Here's my neck.
But the state has readied a noose. After 10 months of investigation, the grand jury determined Tawana Brawley had made it all up. No kidnapping, no rape, no assault.
Those allegations are untrue. The people who made those allegations lied. They are false. There was no sexual assault found here.
Since the grand jury report came out, the Brawley advisors have refused to do a follow-up interview. They've retreated from the mainstream press, although they often resurface at a black radio station, proclaiming themselves victims of the white establishment.
One of the things that we in our community must understand is that there is an ongoing conspiracy against us.
Our careers are not over now. We're going to get some justice out of this case as we have fought for others.
All they did was prove to the world that they're irresponsible, that they lie repeatedly, creating enormous doubts in the minds of people about what really motivated them.
You ain't nothing but a phony, Sharpton. Hey, pull out.
It plays into the minds of those who would not want to believe that there is institutionalized racism in New York. It set back the movement for a time, but we've had other setbacks before. Many of our leaders have made mistakes in the past. The real issue is whether or not the leadership has the potential and the fortitude to stand up and to say that we made a mistake.
1 year later, Tawana Brawley and her advisors say they won't back down. The Brawley family has fled New York.
It's all right now.
Tawana may soon join Louis Farrakhan's Nation of Islam.
'Cause she's ours.
The cause of equal justice may have been all but lost in the controversy over Miss Brawley's case. Maddox once said it was necessary to act corruptly when fighting a corrupt system. That philosophy may have blinded the advisors by turning justifiable zeal into zealotry. As Assemblyman Green put it, any movement for justice must be built upon ethical leadership, or it will lead to scandal. It has. The three advisors are under investigation for mail fraud stemming from a reported $250,000 raised in Tawana's name. And Mason and Maddox face disbarment proceedings.
We shall return! We shall return!